Hey there, welcome to another episode of Lessons on Learning, quick videos, 15 minutes or less, all about exploring how people learn and how we can use that information to create very engaging and effective training sessions for our learners. One of the things about delivering education and training is trying to figure out how much we should do, how much progress our learners should make, and how do we know when they've got there. And although that's a big subject, we're going to start exploring that in this video using a very tried and tested tool called Bloom's taxonomy. And we're going to have a look at how we can figure out where a learner is and, more importantly, where we should be expecting to get them to. So let's dive in. So if you've been spending any time at all in education, in delivering adult education, you will be aware of this Bloom's taxonomy. It was created by Benjamin Bloom way back in 1956 as a way of being able to assess and ascertain whereabouts somebody is on a scale of learning and how we can get them to a deeper level of learning and understanding. Although this isn't the exact replica of what was created back in the 50s, this is a slightly updated version that was created in 2001 by one of Benjamin's students, a chap called David Krawall, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, and his co-worker Lauren Anderson. And if you did kind of do any Googling or research on Bloom's taxonomy, it's probably likely that you're going to find this one rather than the one that was created in the 1950s. It's pretty much the same, it's just the words are a little bit more updated and the meanings are a little bit more modernized. Let's have a look at what these words mean and what the different levels mean so that we can read this pyramid, and then we'll have a look at what we should be doing to figure out what progress our learners are and should be making. Okay, off we go. So look at the very first level there. If you have a look at that first level, it's about remembering. So it's just as simple as that. Does our learner remember any information, perhaps from a previous learning session or previous experience? If we give them some data, are they able to remember it? Can they repeat it back to us? Can they answer fairly simple recall-based questions? If that's the case, then they're at that first level, the sort of first fundamental level of learning, which is simply being able to recall and remember the information and the data that was shared. The next one up is if we were to ask them some slightly deeper questions, would they be able to explain it back to us? Would they be able to answer questions that started perhaps with what if or what happens when or that kind of thing? So in other words, could we test their knowledge of understanding rather than just simply their knowledge of recall? Are they able to explain the information back to us in their own way using their own words and phrases? If so, that means they're at the second level, that level of understanding, so going a little bit deeper into the learning. The third level is, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Can they apply this data or motor skill that we've taught them? Can they apply it to an everyday task or to a workplace task? Can they use the information or the skills that we've shared to help solve a problem or to make a process slightly better, slightly easier, to get a different result? In other words, can they actually do what we've taught them to do, and can they show us a concrete example of them doing it? If so, then they're at the third level. They're at the level of application. Now, what's interesting when you look at that bottom part there as well is that bottom part can be grouped together. Those first three levels can really be grouped together. And although they're the simplest form of kind of understanding and learning, they are very, very important. But what they focus on is recall, recollection, remembering and recall. Can I physically and mentally and verbally remember the information? Can I show that I understand it? And can I demonstrate an application of it? So it's just being able to remember what it is that I was taught. Now, if we want to go a little bit deeper into learning and we really want to make sure sure that our learners are really getting sort of enveloped in the learning of this, then we start to move up the tiers. And the next tier that we're moving up to is what we call analysis, is to analyze. Now, this means, can our learner distinguish between different parts of the concept, or can they distinguish between different parts of the skill or the data? Can they create questions about it? Can they create connections between those different parts and see patterns? And can they explain those patterns back to us? And what do those patterns actually mean? Could they create an experiment from the information to show us a deeper level of learning and understanding? So do they have the ability to really analyze this information? If so, then we can see that they're moving deeper and deeper into the learning, into really embodying this information. The next level up is to evaluate. And to evaluate really means, can they stand, can they hold their ground and tell you the consequence? What does this mean? What does this symbolize? What is it really about? So in other words, could they stand their ground and maybe debate a point? If somebody was to really question them and push them, if somebody was to come up and say to them, all this information that you've learned, it's not true, it's rubbish, could they defend it? Could they defend their standpoint? And could they really give greater meaning to what that information is? Could they evaluate it, draw a line in the sand, and stand their ground on it? And now the next one, last but not least, again, is kind of one of those pretty self-explanatory ones: create. So are they able to create something new with the information that we shared? So this is the very pinnacle of deep learning. Imagine a scientist that's done all the foundation information in their work. They've learned all the fundamentals and they've gone on to learn the really advanced stuff, and then they've created papers and developed their own experiments, and eventually they've got to a point where they're the best in the field and they've used all that knowledge to have a real breakthrough and to discover something that's never been discovered, or to create a process that's never been created before. That's when we know they're at the very pinnacle of their learning and understanding of a concept. So can your learner take what you've given them, the information that you've shared, the skills that you've taught, and not only understand them and analyze them and evaluate them and apply them, but actually create something new, to break through, to innovate, and do something that maybe not even you have ever done before? That's when we know they're at the very highest level of learning and understanding. So that's really what the levels mean. They are the levels, and that's kind of, in very kind of simple terms, that's what they mean. So let's have a look now and use this same model, this same taxonomy, to figure out where our learner is, and more importantly, where we can expect them to be, or where we should be aiming for them to be at the end of the session. Let's get started on that now. So the first thing that we can do is figure out where our learner is when they come into the class. And we could be using some kind of pre-assessment method, or simple questioning, or discussion-based activities, just to figure out whereabouts they are. And it's very easy and quick to figure out, do they remember any of this? Do they already know some of this information? So if I ask them some questions, can they remember some of this information from a previous class or from a prior experience? Can they remember it? If they have no prior knowledge whatsoever, if there's absolutely nothing there, they've not experienced any of this information before, they're an absolute brand new starter, then a simple test is, can I give them some information and then ask them some questions about that information? And are they able to remember, retain, and recall that information when I ask? If that's the case, then we know they're at the first level of learning. So here's what we want to be looking at doing. A good training session, and a good rule of thumb, and remember, this isn't It's not really a rule, it's more of a guide, so it can change. But a good guide to aim for, and you want to write this down, is to aim for 2 levels of progress. 2 levels of progress. So what does that mean? Well, if our learner has not encountered this concept before, if they are an absolute brand new starter with no prior knowledge at all, they're right here. We want to get them to a point where they not only remember the information, but they can demonstrate to us through question and answer and discussion that they understand it. 1, 2 levels. Does that make sense? So for instance, if I was going to learn how to bake bread and I knew nothing about baking bread, I would want to be able to get information that, number 1, I could remember, and number 2, I understood. It's no good me leaving the class being able to remember it but not understand any of it. I would like to be able to remember and understand. That's the minimum. 2 levels. Does this make sense? If I went to a baking class and I remembered all the ingredients and I remembered the procedure and I remembered the process of getting everything ready, but I was still confused because I really didn't understand it, I would not only want to be able to understand it, I would want to be able to apply that understanding and make a loaf of bread. 1, 2 levels. Does that make sense, my friends? If I was going to a baking class and I definitely remembered all the information and I understood why you had to knead it and why you had to let it prove and why you had to bake it at a certain temperature and why you didn't have to open the oven door, if I understood all that, but I was in a class because even though I applied that information, I still couldn't make it work. I was doing everything I'd been taught, but it just wasn't working. I would want to not only be able to apply, but I would also want to be able to analyze what was working and what wasn't working so that I could use that to get better results. 1, 2 levels. And last but not least, if I really understood everything, if I understood how the baking worked and I understood how to make the perfect loaf and I was always making really good loaves of bread and everybody was happy, but maybe I was a bit bored, I wanted to kind of make something else, I wanted to break out of the bowl, out of the mold, I wanted to stand out from the crowd, really take it to the highest level. I wouldn't want to just be able to repeat the same process. I'd want to be able to do something brand new and exciting that had never been done before. I'd want to create a whole new type of bread. 1, 2 levels of progress. Is this making sense, my friends? So we need to figure out whereabouts they are on the grand scale of things. We can ask questions, create exercises, activities, figure out prior knowledge. And then once we know where the learner is, ideally we want to be looking for 2 levels. Sometimes we'll only get 1, that's okay. Sometimes we might get more than 1, that's even better. But as a guide, so that you know that your training, your education is really hitting home and so that the learner feels they're getting good progress, if we can look for 2 levels on this pyramid, get them 1, 2 levels higher, we know we've done a good job and our learner is going to walk away very fulfilled, but more importantly, getting the results that they're looking for. Look, I hope that helps, my friends. If you've got any questions about that or you want to dive deeper on something, drop a comment below, ask me questions. I promise I'll read and answer them. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, like it. Most importantly, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're finding all the other videos on the channel useful, make sure you tell your friends. I would love to interact with you, answer any questions you've got, enter into some positive debate with you as well, and also create any video that you think might be useful to you. Okay, so I hope that helps, and I hope I see you again very soon, my friends, for more lessons on learning. Take care, my friend. Bye bye. See you again soon.